Hello and welcome to the Final Frontiersmen, a YouTube channel about all things Trek with a heavy focus on the Star Trek Adventures role-playing game by Modiphius. I'm your host Bill, and today I am going to be doing a review about definitely the biggest surprise product in the Star Trek Adventures line this year, but maybe since the whole entire game launched. This is Captain's Log for Star Trek Adventures, and it's going to be pretty different from everything else I've reviewed thus far for the game line Star Trek Adventures. First of all, a disclaimer / disclosure, I was provided a review copy for Captain's Log by Modiphius, and that was very kind of them to do. It was a PDF. So this is the first time, actually, this is new ground for me that I was given something for free just for the review to do. Eventually I'm going to buy my own physical copy, but for the sake of the review, they they gave me this PDF copy for that. So it's not the first time Modiphius has shown me kindness, but it is the first time I received something for free from them. So I want to say thank you to Modiphius, especially Jim Johnson, who has always been a supporter of this channel. So thank you all very, very much. As usual, this is going to be a review. So we have our, on this channel, we have our review system with the alerts. The yellow alert, as you can see on the opposite side than where I gestured, is for something to take note of. The red alerts are for the things that we think are great, and the black alerts are for the big game changers. So going into this review, just to start right away before I even really begin the review, let's just kick this off right. Black alert. There we go. Why is it a black alert? Black alert is a game changer, and this Captain's Log is literally a game changer for Star Trek Adventures because it is a different game. This is the solo version of Star Trek Adventures. Now I want to I want to be careful how I say it. It's not a solo rule set per se for Star Trek Adventures. This is technically a different game on its own, even though it uses a modified version of the Star Trek Adventures rules. It is not really Star Trek Adventures, the vanilla version that we have and the Klingon version. Everything we have up until this point, it's not quite that, but it's not quite its own thing. But it is unique. It is the solo version of Star Trek Adventures. Now, I've been getting this question, well, I've seen this question a lot online, and I've actually gotten this question a lot since I started this channel. Probably the #1 question I've gotten, is there a way to play Star Trek Adventures solo? Now you have it. Captain's Log for Star Trek Adventures is the solo version of the game. So if you are out there and you want to run the game solo, or you don't have a group, you can't find a group, you're not comfortable with the group, you just want to play by yourself, make your own stories, this is it for you. But wait, there's more, because these rules also allow for group play. So it's not like this is only a solo book. Even though it is technically the solo rules for it, there are versions and varieties of play located in the pages of this book that will explain how you can use it in many different settings, whether it's alone, whether it's in group, or even with the original Star Trek Adventures itself. Hopefully I'm going to explain that a little bit more in detail as I go through the review. I say hopefully because normally I say I'm going to get to that later, and I forget to get to it later. But I think I'm going to touch on it. I have a ton of notes. So without further ado, let me jump into the small video box down there. And I honestly don't know what kind of images or things I'm going to be showing you while I'm talking here, because it's not really a graphics heavy book. And a lot of the art that is in there, I would say the majority of the art, comes from other Star Trek Adventures products. So it's not like I have a whole lot of unique images to show you, but I'm sure I will find something. Let me just say that before I go in chapter by chapter, I don't want to go into too much depth and detail in it and just drag this video out, but I do want to touch on each chapter. Before I do that though, I just want to mention that it's called Captain's Log. It's designed as a solo experience for Star Trek Adventures. The whole goal is to put the spotlight, put the point of view on your character, the main character that you create for this. So I would liken it to not an ensemble show, but rather you are looking at the adventures of the starship through the view of one specific character. Now, again, everything with Star Trek Adventures up until this point, and including Captain's Log, is so malleable. There is no hard set rule that this is how you have to play it. So it's called Captain's Log. The idea is you are designing a captain. This is your captain's game. But you don't have to be a captain. You could play anyone. You could play a lower decker. You could play non-aligned. You could play Klingon. It doesn't have to be Starfleet. You can literally create any kind of character that you want, as you would in the original Star Trek Adventures game. But the goal is, or I would say the design is, to show the adventure, show the mission through their eyes. But yet again, you don't have to stick with that. You could create multiple characters if you want. You could have a group play together if you want. The group could share the one character. The group could have individual characters. Keep that in mind as I'm going through this review. It's designed through the point of view of your main character for this series. However, you are free to do anything you want with the system, just like you could do with Star Trek Adventures. No hard set rules. So please always keep that in mind when we're doing Star Trek Adventures thing. You are free to adjust this game however you want. And there is a lot you can adjust in Captain's Log. It's really something else. It's really an impressive rule set for the game. Maybe one other thing I want to point out before going in. A pretty big thing, questions I see a lot, not to me, but I see a lot on all the social media channels. They're coming again and again. It's the same one. There are 4 different covers for Captain's Log. You may have seen there's a Discovery version, there's a original series version, there is the Deep Space Nine version, and there's the Next Generation version. The covers are different. It has the different badge, the different type of badge from that series on the cover, and a different quote on the back, but the content is exactly the same. There's no difference in the content at all. You just buy whatever cover you want. So if you want to run a TOS game, you don't have to buy the book that has the TOS badge on the cover. You could buy any of the books. They are all the same. It's just whichever art you like. I know a lot of people seem to be confused by that. Maybe an unfortunate side effect of Modiphius experimenting with offering these variant covers, but it's no different than the collector's edition that they have for like the Discovery book or Utopia Planitia. You have your choice of art for the cover, but everything inside is going to be identical. So keep that in mind. Don't think you have to buy all 4 or the specific book for the era you want to run. That is not true. I will say another thing before going into the rules. One thing I really think this book could be used for, even if you're just a straight up Star Trek Adventures player, is you could use it to flesh out your character for maybe what did they do before they came on the ship, or what are they doing in between episodes of your normal Star Trek Adventure series, or even more, when you're designing your character, you have the whole life path system, you have career events that shape your character. You could create these private solo episodes to showcase exactly what happened in that career event. There's a whole variety of ways you could use Captain's Log, even as part or adjacent to a regular Star Trek Adventures game you're running. So it is a great resource. It's a great addition to have alongside with your original standard Star Trek Adventures game. So even if you're not planning on running it solo permanently, it's a great way to just keep fleshing out characters, or maybe in creating new characters and putting them on adventures before you introduce them into a standard STA game. All right, so here we go. We're going to jump into the different chapters. Let me take a look. I have a ton of notes I took here, so I'm going to be picky and choosy of what I want to say. So let's go into chapter 1. Chapter 1, I'll say chapter 1 and possibly chapter 2 I will squeeze together, and I'm going to give them a yellow alert. Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, first Chapter 1 is Star Trek Defined. This breaks down again what Star Trek is about, and it gives 10 aspects of this game, Captain's Log. Now, this may sound familiar. This is stuff that is taken almost verbatim, not exactly, from the Player's Guide and also the Game Master's Guide. The reason being is that this book is designed to be a one-stop shop for running Captain's Log. You do not have to buy anything else. This will give you everything. And by everything, I mean this is going to teach you what is Star Trek, just like the PG and the GMG do, if you need that help. This is going to teach you what is role-playing, what is role-playing in the Star Trek universe, and what are all the details to keep the game running mechanically and smoothly as you're playing as a solo player. This is pretty much a toolkit for running your own RPG. So everything you would need as a player for a Star Trek role-playing game is contained inside these covers to make sure that you don't have to jump to this book, go to that book, buy another book to get what you want. You can do 100% everything here. It's reference material, it's rules, and it's the guide to get you through the game. So chapter 1 is pretty much lifted from the Player's Guide and the Game Master's Guide, which is the adjustments to make it compatible for Captain's Log. Same as chapter 2. Chapter 2 is the Star Trek universe. This is where in the PG and the GMG it goes down into very minute detail as a like crash course 101 of what is life like in the Star Trek universe. You got on culture, religion, economy, politics, all of the technology. It breaks down the different eras. What are they? What from the different shows, Enterprise all the way up through Discovery in the 32nd century. It's the perfect handbook for players who want to know about Trek. Maybe your I could say that Trexpertise is the word I obviously can't say, is not maxed out. So you have basically this little dictionary, this encyclopedia for you right here, just like the PG and the GMG. It's all contained here for Captain's Log as its own standalone game. So chapter 1, chapter 2, if you have the PG and GMG, or you're an expert in Star Trek, you might not need to read through it, but I find it to be a fascinating read. And just like when I did the review of the PG and the GMG, reading this really sparks a lot of new ideas with me, and also reminds me of a lot of little details about the technology and the people and the races and the cultures that maybe I know, but it slipped my mind because there's just so much Star Trek lore out there. So I do recommend reading through it, but if you're familiar with STA, if you're familiar with Star Trek and role-playing, you might not need to read those chapters so closely. You could jump straight ahead to Chapter 3. So let's do that. Chapter 3 is the Reporting for Duty chapter, and this is the character creation chapter. Now, it has the same exact kind of style for creating characters, just like STA. You have the life path option where it takes you same thing, step by step. And I know BC Holmes, character creator, online character creator that I talked about in multiple videos, including the online resources videos recently that I put up. That's going to have, it has a section there for Captain's Log. It's just waiting for the official street release date, and it will go live, so you could use that to create your character. So life path option, just like in STA, where you're building through your character's being raised wherever to their career in Starfleet, as well as if they're not going to be Starfleet. Are they going to be civilian? Are they going to be Klingon? Again, everything is contained in here. It's the one-stop shop for running this game, so you don't need any other resource. Now, this game has the same attributes, the same disciplines as Star Trek Adventures, but you'll notice one major difference is your character does not have stress, does not have, I would like to have no stress, does not have resistance, does not have equipment, does not have talents, and that sounds like me too. So there is a difference between the characters in STA and this. As you could see, really cut down, really streamlined. You might be thinking, well, wait a minute, if there's no stress, there's no resistance, there's no talent, like what do I do in combat? Because stress, of course, is how you take damage in STA. Vastly different from how you do it in this game because it is so streamlined. I'll get to that in the combat chapter in a little bit, so wait for that. But it's designed to make you jump in, create your character, be ready to go right away, and you don't have to micromanage all these rules because you don't have a GM there. You don't have a group of players there to talk through. It's to make the story the #1 focus and your character the star of that story. You don't have to worry about all the little details. That's not important. When they come up, they are done in the easiest, most simplified way possible to make sure your story keeps going and you're not there with a pen and paper trying to figure things out on your own. I think that's a brilliant idea for a solo game like this. I think keeping everything streamlined, wait till you see the starships, will just make it flow so much easier and make this, honestly, probably the best gateway into Star Trek Adventures, or even Star Trek role-playing, or even just role-playing in general for newcomers to the field. So, great idea. I've never actually played a solo RPG before, so I don't know how this stacks up with other systems. I've never really been interested, but as this is STA, this is basically an STA YouTube channel, and I am in love with STA. I had to check this out, and I'm impressed with how they've done it. So, no talents, no stress, equipment, resistance, that's all taken care of narratively. You get information, again, it's like PG, GMG, where it will explain to you, especially if you're a new player, what the attributes and what the disciplines mean, especially when they're combined together. So you got a clear vision when you do have to make a roll in this game, what constitutes a con and presence roll. So it gives you those details just like in the PG and GMG. One-stop shop, as I keep saying. It's a standalone book. Everything is there for you. Focuses are also a little bit different. This game does have focuses in them, but they're used slightly differently, or they're treated slightly differently. But generally, it's the same thing. They show what your character specializes in, but you're able to change them and swap them out a lot more frequently. One thing that you'll start to notice in this chapter, and I'm going to give a yellow alert for, and it's going to even grow bigger as this review goes on, but this book is full of matrices, random tables. This game is designed to use these matrices to basically be the engine to run the game for you. But in this chapter, all of these matrices are designed to, if you want to make your character randomly, you could literally create an entirely 100% random character from scratch by using all of these matrices in this chapter. So it's a very interesting way to, if you want to just be totally surprised what your series is about and just jump in, and it's like you're watching the series. The matrices in this book will do that for you, and starting in this chapter, you could do that by learning who this star of your series is together with as you're going through it. You could go in with zero idea and have a completely fleshed out, built character by the end of this chapter. There is also, I said it has the life path option, which is this, but there is also the option for the creation in play, just like in STA, where you don't have to fully commit to fleshing out your character, creating them 100% right away. You could do the bare bones, and it explains how to do that, and then you just jump in and start playing right away, because you don't know who your character is. And as the episode goes on, as the adventure goes on, you finish building your character. It's not too dissimilar from the actual TV series too, where you know the actors, the audience, and even the writers don't really know completely who those characters are in episode 1. It's all informed by how the actor portrays the character, how the writer continues to write for the character, how the audience reacts. All of this is like a circle of life that slowly changes and makes the character grow as each episode goes on. And that's a perfectly reasonable way how to build your character in this game too. Values are pretty similar to how it's used in STA. There's slight difference, but it also, they're to be used to make the episode more dramatic, as they should be in STA, but a little more so in this, as it's a completely narrative driven game. I do want to point out one thing though, that the values, the description for the values in the book, there's a couple places where it describes about using values and challenging values. To me, it was a little confusing. It sounded like every single time a value is used, you had to rewrite that value, or you had to change the value at the end of the episode. It really seemed like the book kept repeating that when I would see values mentioned, but that's not the case. If it makes sense, that's pretty much a rule of Captain's Log. If it makes sense, do it. So if you use the value and it makes sense that it would change based on that use, then you would change it. If it doesn't make sense that it would change, then you wouldn't change it. So keep that in mind when you're playing Captain's Log or when you're reading through it. One of the core tenets is that, does it make sense? Then do that. So when you're reading it, it might seem like you have to do this, you have to do that, but I don't think that's ever going to be the case in Captain's Log. Just do whatever makes sense or fits the story, fits the narrative best. Take a look at notes here. Oh yeah, I do have to give a red alert to this. Definitely, and this is going to be popping up a lot. This book, this chapter starts very well demonstrating it. But this book has a lot of flow charts to make it very, very, very easy to visualize each step of the process. In this chapter, it's how to create a character, and it includes a flow chart, a really nice flow chart to show you step by step, this is what you have to do to make your character. So if you get confused, if you're not exactly sure, if you skipped a step, or what you need to do if you need to make another character, you could just go straight to the flow chart and it will show you what pages you have to look at, what steps along the way, and what they do mechanically for making your character. Throughout the book, throughout the chapters, there are going to be a lot of great summary flowcharts, so I might not mention them each time, but just know anytime you're doing something in this game, you can usually find a flowchart nearby that is going to streamline you doing that again after you read and know how to do it the first time you got the flowchart. I thought that was a great visual aid and a great thing to include throughout the book. So flowcharts, amazing. Some other things in here. Yeah, as I said, you can make random characters. There's a lot of, you could choose the random species. And one thing I noticed, and I'm giving that a red alert too, I could be wrong, and I very frequently am, but I think there's about 8 new species in this book that have yet to appear as a player option, I should say, have yet to appear as a player option in standard Star Trek adventures. And I think this might be a hint of some of the future content that we are going to be getting in Star Trek Adventures. But what I've noticed, and again, I could be wrong, but I don't think there were player options for these species. I saw the ANR, the Binars, Duplers, Illyrians, Horta, Kazon, why not, right? Kazinti, and the Soliban. Again, some of these maybe I missed it, maybe I overlooked in one of the source books, but you could play as these character types. These are player character options in this game, and I think that might be a hint of things we're going to be seeing perhaps this year, perhaps next year. I don't know, but I think that's pretty exciting. Again, there's matrices every step of the way, so you can make everything random however you want. It combines all the different types of gameplay that you could do: Klingon, non-aligned, non-Starfleet. There's so much included in this chapter. It also goes into, let's see, I already mentioned that, so let me just skip through my notes. Character development too, how to level up your characters. It's a little bit of a iffy subject in Star Trek Adventures. I know a lot of people have complained about the lack of development or the slow development, depending on which development system that you use. In this game too, it focuses all on the narrative and what makes sense to you. So you decide, you choose when your character levels up. You choose when they get the advancement based on how your adventures play out. So there's no again, hard set rule that you have to follow by this many adventures, you have to do this, have to do that, and they advance. Go by whatever feels natural by how you run your game. That is going to be a theme throughout Captain's Log. I think the last thing in this chapter, I'll give a yellow alert to. It's very easy to swap back and forth between Captain's Log and Star Trek Adventures. If you're going from STA to Captain's Log, really there's no modding involved at all. You're just losing the stress, resistance, talents, and bam, they're right there, pretty much. If you're going from Captain's Log to Star Trek Adventures, you'll have to do a little bit of calculating because now you do need stress, you do need resistance. So you have to finish those last few things out about character creation. Otherwise, very easy to take a character back and forth between the two systems. So as I mentioned before, if you want to play out side missions between games, if you want to play out backstories of your characters in STA, or if you want to start solo and then you find a group and you want to join that group, easy to port it over from one system to another. Yellow alert for those who are interested. I think that's a great addition to have. The fact that it is not complicated to swap between these two rule set makes it why I say makes it a great side addition to STA no matter what you're doing. Okay. Chapter 4. I was going to say Star Trek 4. Chapter 4. This is your home among the stars. So here we go with our starships and star bases. This is the chapter similar to the characters where you're designing your starship or your star base. Again, there's a great flow chart to take you through the creation process. Random matrices throughout to choose what era, to choose what space frame, to choose the different options in your ship. Everything could be random as you want. Now, the starships are even more streamlined than characters. You have no shields, so there's no stress that they're taking damage in there. It's basically just system, department, skill, traits, and talents. And basically the talents serve a similar role to focuses for characters. So the talents aren't like the ones in STA where they have mechanical rules built into them. They are basically the focuses for the starships. In STA, starships are considered to have focuses on everything, and that's not the case here. The talents become the focus for there, and it has lists and lists of talents to give your starships, or you could do it randomly with the matrices, of course. I'm going to give a red alert. very similar to what I did in the previous chapter, because again, I could be completely wrong, but I've seen a few ships in here that I don't believe we've had before as player options in Star Trek Adventures, particularly Discovery's 32nd century ships. I saw they have the Angelou class, the Eisenberg class, Friendship, Janeway, and the Kirk class for the 32nd century. Now, one thing I do want to point out is the ships, the stats they give you in this book. Again, it's a streamlined version. So the stats they give you, it's not like you have the space frame and you're building like a mission profile. It's just one set block of stats of the what is it, the system and, oh my god, the word, it's system and departments. They are not exactly the same of what you'll find in Utopia Planitia. Some of them are similar to the starship of the class, so like the Enterprise F for the Odyssey class. Maybe it'll be the exact same stats, but the stats maybe don't reflect the base stats or the ship that the ship of the line that it shows you in Utopia Planitia. It's all a matter of balance. So it's not like you could take these ships like the Eisenberg class and say, oh, this is exactly what the stats are going to be like when it's finally released in STA, but it will give you a hint. So if you wanted to take it and you want to flesh it out and make it in your game, you'll be pretty darn close. You get a rough idea of what the ship looks like with the stats. So I thought that's great. Sneak peek, probably sneak peek, I don't know, but probably sneak peek for the game. One other thing I want to point out, I don't know how many instances, but again, I could be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, but I was looking through the random tables of building the starship, and after that they have the pages showing all the starships and their stats, their traits, so you could use it. One of the ships you could roll up randomly is a Centaur class ship, but I didn't see it listed in the book, so there's no stats for it in the book. In that case, you would have to go and to Utopia Planitia or look online or just make it up yourself. So I thought that was odd. It seemed like a weird omission, unless I missed it, because sometimes I just miss things. I'm so oblivious. But it seemed like weird to overlook something like that when everything else in this book is designed to be standalone, need nothing else, and then just missing the stats for one of the ships you could roll up, at least I should say one of the ships you could roll up. That just seemed a little odd to me, but again, it's easily worked around, not a huge deal, and I could be wrong, and I often am wrong. Okay, also I should point out that just like making a character, you could also make the starship same thing in play as you're playing it, flesh it out as the adventure is going on. So if you're not sure what talents it has, just go into the game, start playing, and then realize, oh, okay, well, we're on this kind of mission. We would probably have this installed on the ship and build it that way. So same thing. Everything is flexible in this game. Everything is permitted. Okay, nothing is true. So let's go into Chapter 5. Chapter 5 now. We're already flying through here. Rules of play. This is, just as it says, this is how to play Captain's Log. And beautiful thing, all you need to play is 3 things. First, you need a notepad or something to jot down notes, or even write your Captain's Log if you want to, but you're going to need some way of keeping track of what's going on. You need a pair of D20s. Sometimes you need a third D20, but really all you need are 2 D20s because it's a 2 D20 system. And this book, or at least the matrices that they include in the book, in the back of the book, in all the appendices. There are matrices for running every aspect of the game. I'm going to be getting to that soon enough, but that's all you need. Pen and paper, or whatever writing implement you decide. The book, primarily just those matrices to keep the game running and self-creating, and 2 D20s. There you go. So simple, so easy. There's explains the differences in Star Trek Adventure. It doesn't really frame it as differences so much, but if you're familiar with STA, you'll notice the differences like momentum and threat. You could only have one point of each at any given time, so it works very differently from Star Trek Adventures, but it's also very simple. It's easy to do. There's tons of examples, and that is one of the best things about this chapter and many of the other more, I don't want to say complicated because there's nothing really complicated in here, but they give a lot of sidebars and examples to demonstrate and illustrate exactly what they're talking about. So if you're not really sure what the rules mean as you're reading it, probably in a page or two you are going to see an example of what they're talking about in play, in action, so you could better visualize it. And of course, like I said, flow charts, they have a lot of those diagrams in there to make it even more streamlined. One of the best things they have in here. Another thing, this kind of confused me at first when I read it the first time, but the second time I read the book, it made a little bit more sense. Something that's completely new to Captain's Log, not in Star Trek Adventures. It has a mission tracker, and you have the forms at the back of the book for printing out for your characters and for the mission you're doing, and the mission tracker is at the bottom of the mission log. It's 15 Star Trek deltas. That 15 scenes is like the default for a game of Captain's Log. You could, again, make it shorter, make it longer, however works best for you. But basically, each one of those deltas counts as one of the scenes. And this chapter explains to you the 3-act design of a Star Trek episode. And one mission in Captain's Log would be 3 acts. One act would be 5 scenes. One whole episode would be 15 scenes by default. So as you're playing the game, as you do a scene, you will then cross off one of those deltas in the mission tracker. If you were successful in that scene, you would color it in. If you failed, you would mark that it was failed on there. So you could see as the episode's going on how successful your character is becoming, and that will help maybe give you ideas on what the next scene is going to play like, or what the next act is going to play like. If you're doing very well and you're succeeding at everything, maybe you need to throw in a bigger challenge in the next act to make it a little more exciting and dramatic. Or maybe things have been so hard thus far, so maybe you need to focus on more things to kind of turn around the story, give your character a chance to actually succeed by the end of it. So it's a way of not only tracking your progress as succeeding and failing, but also helping you maintain pace in the episode. So if you're especially new to the game, you're not just like, oh my god, when does this end? You just keep going. You have a visual there of, okay, this act ends in 5 scenes, this act in 5 scenes, this act in 5 scenes. So what makes sense for this scene? What makes sense for this scene? Okay, I'm at the end of the act, so it should be something a little bit bigger. So how does that lead into that? It's a good way of keeping you focused on telling a tight, concise, and not meandering story to keep your game flowing. So second time I read through it, it made a lot more sense to me. But the first time reading it, since it's not in Star Trek Adventures, I didn't quite grasp it. But now, yeah, I get it. I see the utility. I'm all for it now. What else is... I mentioned that before, so no need to repeat that. Some good thing, of course, you're rolling tasks in the game similar to STA, because you have your stats here. But as I said, there are a lot of random matrices throughout the book and to be used to create your story. So you could even streamline your game more according to the rules here, where instead of even just rolling your task roll, you could see whether something happens or not by rolling on a probability matrix. So you get plenty of options to make your game as dice rolling heavy or light as you want, or how much luck you want to have involved inside the narration. The game is just freely designed. It's I really don't want people to be overwhelmed and confused by seeing this rulebook, especially as I said, this game is really a good resource for brand new players. And you might be looking at this thick book and thinking, I've never run a game before, I never played a game before, I don't know if I can solo grok all these rules here. It's not. This book is more or less a friend telling you this is how to play the game, this is how it's run, but honestly, do your own thing. You don't even have to think about it. Here's a chart, roll on that, bam, that's what's happening right now. What does that look like? Think about that. It is really open, it's really user friendly, so don't let the little minute things I'm talking about overwhelm you. I'm just pointing out things that stood out to me as a longtime player of STA and somebody brand new to the solo role-playing scene. But honestly, this game is as open and user-friendly as can be to get you in, get you going. You roll this, you don't like that, guess what? It's whatever you want it to be, because this is your story. This is your character's story. Change it, mold it, make it whatever you need for your game. That's what I love about the rules here. That's what I love about the explanation here. It constantly reassures you that you don't have to worry about these details. The game is whatever you make of it. This is just giving you the guidance to get through it automatically, so it's running itself for you and you are interpreting it however best suits the needs of your game. I love it. I thought that's great. Again, it goes into momentum and threat. I talked about that. How to use that. It's very different from STA, but it's not difficult. There's very limited things you could use it for. It's very simple. You could do this or you could do that. It makes perfect sense with the rules light version of Star Trek that this is. Focuses, it shows you how the focuses are different from STA, where it's not giving you, it's not really giving you extra successes. It's basically creating the advantages for you. In this game, you're rolling 2d20. It's not like STA where you could roll up a pool of 5. You're always rolling 2d20, except some of the random charts might have you roll 3d20. But the bulk of the game, the task rolls, it's always 2d20. One success is all you need, unless there's a complication, in which case both dice you need successes on. And again, there's a lot of variety of how you can mix and match with that rule here. Super streamlined. I think you're getting the point by now. Gives a list of possible actions that the character could take. So if you're unfamiliar with the role playing, if you're unfamiliar with what you should do as a solo player, you don't have a GM to ask for advice, this gives you a section of you could do an action concerning this, and this is what success would look like, this is what a failure would look like, this is what an advantage might do for this type of action, this is what a complication might do for this type of action. So again, it is like a friend who supports you in getting through this game, so you are fully automated to run it on your own. There's ways of rolling up NPCs, the non-player characters in the game. There's multiple options for doing that. Or you don't even have to create the NPCs. You could use the probability matrices to do the work for you, or even use the starship's abilities to represent the talent of your crew. It's however you want to make it for the game. Combat is also covered in here, and combat is also extremely streamlined. There is no enemy that's rolling against you. You are the only one rolling dice. So when you're rolling combat, your dice roll, if it succeeds, that is a hit on your behalf. If your roll failed, then you take a hit from the enemy in that combat, whether it's hand-to-hand combat, whether it's social combat, whether it's starship combat. It's all basically the same way. You don't have to worry about stats of enemy ships doing this, that. It's your role. Did you succeed? No. So in the narrative, you take a hit from that and you just go through it. Story-wise, keeps it moving fast, no crunch, no calculating. It keeps it very, 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 very smooth. And basically, 3 hits and you're out. Whether that's the villain or whether that's yourself, you're defeated in 3 hits. Starships are slightly different. It's 3 critical hits, which is based on scale, but at the same time, it's the same thing. You take 3 main hits, you lose, or you deal 3 main hits, you succeed. Very, very easy to do. Keeps the game moving fast. Now, we already know that there is no stress. There's no resistance. So you did get defeated. So you're injured. How are you injured even though you don't have stress? And that's again where the matrices come in. They have matrices for injury, for where you're hurt, for any kind of lingering complication. All of that is done with these automated matrices throughout the appendix of the book. So you'll have, without having to calculate numbers, you could just quickly roll. Okay, that's what's damaged. That's what's hurt. This is the complication involved by it. And the story keeps on going. Couldn't be easier. And guess what? No surprise here. Flowchart. Flowchart that will explain to you how Starship Combat works, what you should do, what's the next step along the way. So easy, so helpful. This whole book is expertly put together. It shows that the people behind it, I know Michael Dismuke is the main writer, and I think he did the bulk of the whole book. I know there are others, but it shows they had a clear, definite vision of how they wanted to present this book to all players, new and old alike, and they did it in probably the easiest to understand way possible. The excitement I've seen for this game so far online is maybe the biggest I've seen yet in Star Trek Adventures. And that's saying something because Utopia Planitia really blew everyone away, but I've never seen so much energy and enthusiasm behind one of the products as I'm seeing right now for Captain's Log. And I think that's owed a lot to how something that could be complicated, like the rules, are presented in a way that is just so easy to go through. And even if you're confused, there's your example, there's your flowchart. It will take you through and make it so much more clear by the end. This game is really a labor of love, Captain's Log. Now, another thing I'm going to give a red alert for that is also in this chapter, it's a pretty big chapter, the modes of play. Why the modes of play? Because this is a solo game. Or is it? This offers not only solo game, but collaborative play. So you could bring a group together and all of you basically playing with the solo rules, but you're playing as a group. Also guided play. Guided play, what's that? You have a GM now. Why do you need a GM? Who knows? But no, really, in here it explains to you how you can have a GM who basically, it's called guided play. He or she guides the game to allow you, especially maybe players who are not familiar with role-playing or they want somebody to help them, give them a little boost, guide them through the story. But the story is still being made by the player, by the matrices, by the randomness they're coming up from their decisions, from their rules. But now you have a support that keeps the game going. It explains to do all the different kinds of, I should say, different modes of playing Captain's Log. And I will say there are some players out there who are taking the rules from Captain's Log and just using it to run standard issue Star Trek Adventures, but in a much more streamlined, easy, simplified way. You can do that too. No problem with that. This game is flexible in every sense of the word. So bye-bye Red Alert. And we are into chapter 6 now. This is really the final chapter of the book. This is playing Captain's Log. Playing Captain's Log. And you might think, well, isn't the last chapter we did all about the rules? Well, yes, it is. I would describe chapter 6 as the standard RPG rulebook's GM section, the Game Master section, for a game that has no GM. That's basically what this is. This is all the advice on how to run the game, how to play the game. Not the rules, but how to play it, what it should look like, what it should feel like. We already have from the beginning, chapters 1 and 2, we know what Star Trek has. We know what is common in Star Trek, what we want to use. Now, when you are the writer, you're the director, you are the actor in this episode, how are you going to make that move as smoothly as possible? How are you going to make that replicate the TV series? So it gives you advice on standard structures of a session, just like a TV show. Cold opens using captain's log entries, the vocal entries. How do you establish scenes? How do you describe scenes? This is, again, a GM's chapter for a game that has no GM. You could basically learn the skills of how to be a GM by going through this chapter and playing captain's log by yourself for a while. You might jump into a STA game later on and GM it, and you have the skills with you, because this is a toolbox. Chapter 6 is a toolbox for how to become comfortable with running the game solo, running a solo RPG, and just taking those skills and using them as a role player, as a potential game master in the future. Also, it explains how to write your own captain's log to keep track of the game. If you want to have a captain's log so you could document all of your adventures, it gives you advice on how to do that. It gives you advice how to play through scenes, more flow charts of how a scene flows, how a scene moves. So if you're not sure, okay, I did this, what else should I do in the scene? You have a flow chart there that telling you what the standard pace of a scene is like. There's storytelling devices explained throughout here: flashback, in media res, ports of call, transitions, cutaway scenes. It's almost like you're getting a small crash course in directing a TV series. Even has how do you create a great finale for your story, for your session, for your episode, for an entire season, and how to reflect back on what your episode, what your session was like, to help you know where to take your character in the next adventure, or how to make them grow in the next session. This chapter is really, it's separate from the GMG, but it is that type of information, that type of utility that you could use anywhere, anytime, for running the game solo or in a group. I really love this chapter. I think as a forever GM, as it's called, I think it's great advice, and it's a great way for me, as someone who never plays a solo RPG, to get more of a comfortable grasp on what it's going to be like running this kind of game without a group of players to go. It's just me GMing myself, with the game basically acting as the main GM. So, love this chapter. Thought it was great. Thought great advice just in general. Now, that's the end of the chapters, but that's not the end of the book. We next have the appendices. Appendix 1 through 5. I believe there's 5. We have 5 appendices in this book at the end, and these are all the random matrices. These are all the matrices that you are going to use to run the game. So after you learn how to play it, reading chapters 1 through 6, when you're playing the game, pretty much all you need is this whole back of the books, appendices 1 through 5. And I am giving this a black alert. And the reason why I'm giving this a black alert is because, just like how this is a game changer, making Star Trek Adventures a solo experience, you can take the majority of these matrices that are found in these appendices here and just use them in every single game of Star Trek Adventures that you run. If you need a new planet, if you need a new character, if you need a new starship, if you need a new complication, if you need to know the probability of something happening, if you need a random time interval, you now have this chart here that this is now a resource for your Star Trek Adventures game, not just Captain's Log game. That's why it's a black alert. This is where it becomes a very, I don't know if I would say crucial resource for Star Trek Adventures, but a very helpful resource, especially for new budding GMs who haven't run a game before. You read chapter 6, it gives you the advice, it gives you the courage to do it. Now you have all the appendices to run it in Captain's Log, and you could take this with you and run your own full game with a group of players and help keep it going, even if you don't have that full toolbox up here ready to improvise on your own yet as a GM. Perfect section of the book to take with you. Just flying through, Appendix 1 is the probability matrices on generating missions for your game, themes, incidents, advantages, complications, encounters, threat spends, all that stuff. Appendix 1, these are your utility matrices here. Appendix 2 are your allies and your adversaries, creating your NPC crews, creating beasts, spaceborne creatures. That's creatures, and beasts are crease. There you go. Enemies. Appendix 3, what we have here, locations and starships. So you could create random sectors, random systems, civilizations, governments, religions, starship stations, the damage that they get, the complications that come up from being damaged, the casualties when a ship takes damage. You have all these random matrices here. Appendix 4, these are the additional matrices. So what you do downtime on ship, or the different kind of random games you could be playing on ship. It's mining, it has resources. A lot of that stuff was in Utopia Planitia, radiation, time intervals, even the name generator. That is pretty cool. And the final appendix, not really a utility to use in the game, but these are all the different forms to play the game. The character sheets, the mission sheets, the reference charts. That's in the final appendix of the book. And that is it. That is Star Trek Adventures Captain's Log. What a book. What a guide. Literal game changer, because it is not STA. It is STA Captain's Log. It's its own game. It's a standalone game. It's a one-stop shop for running everything Star Trek solo. Well, I mean, you could, like I said, you could even take those appendices and use it in STA. So it's full solo all the way up to using it as a resource for a group play with Star Trek Adventures. I will recommend one thing, if my long-winded video is not enough for you. Jim Johnson, the line manager for Star Trek Adventures from Modiphius, he has his own YouTube channel, and he has been making a great guide, taking you step by step himself as a player, going through Captain's Log to show you what it looks like from beginning to running your own adventure. Highly recommend checking those out. And he does it fully random, using all the matrices. You don't have to, of course. Like I said, everything is your choice, whatever works best for you. But he shows you how to use the matrices, how to create your game, how to populate everything just from the book itself, going in with zero prep, zero plan, and it really illustrates very well what a game of Captain's Log looks like. So that's it. That's it for my review. I think this is an amazing addition, not only to the STA line, but as its own unique standalone product, its own original role-playing game. I recommend it. I think it's great. I'm not really a solo player, and I got plenty of stuff going on in my game, so there's not a lot I'm going to use from this book yet, but I am very tempted that when I get a free chance to start playing around with it, running some things with side characters, and seeing the kind of adventures that come out. It impressed me from start to finish. I think this is what so many prospective STA players have been looking for. So I highly recommend it, especially if you're into solo role-playing, or if you just want a very compact guide to running a streamlined, easy, smooth version of Star Trek Adventures. Captain's Log, that'll do it for you. And that will do it for this episode. as usual, far longer than I expected it to be, but what else is to be expected? Thank you very much. Thank you for watching. Thank you for tuning in. I hope this was some help to you, and I hope to see you again in the future. Until next time, stay safe out there, everyone. Peace and long life.